for coming and your interest in WCTF. So just first of you, a quick overview of Commonwealth Corporation. I'm sure you're all familiar. Organization, it's a quasi-private state organization. What that means, it's basically a private organization that's funded through public dollars, both state and federal dollars. And it's all about upskilling residents in the Commonwealth. So I'm sure that relates a lot to the work that you're doing. In our vision, I'm sure that relates to your work as well, is a world where meaningful employment can lead to upward mobility for all. So just good to frame that. You also might be aware, we won't go into detail with all these grants, but there are other grant opportunities within Commonwealth Corporation. And if you're interested in any of these, you're not aware of them already, not already connected, very happy to connect you with those directors of leadership of those grants as well. All sharing the same mission. So this is just a quick overview of the Workforce Competitiveness Trust Fund team. As I mentioned, I'm the director of the program. You just met the associate director and the senior program manager. We've got a great team here. And so if some of you are current grantee partners, some of you hopefully will become one in the future, you might be working with any and many of these individuals. And then, of course, even more people behind the scenes. Takes a village. So Workforce Competitiveness Trust Fund at a glance. We were established in 2006 as part of an economic development bill, and it's been a line item in the state budget ever since. And it's all about supporting programs and organizations such as yours with worker skills, incomes, productivity, and retention, which are the key themes. It's also about increasing the quality and competitiveness of sector partnerships or industry partnerships. Right now, we're looking at ceiling awards of $500,000. So in the past, in the last couple of years, we were able to surpass that, but that was mostly through federal funds, which have been awarded at this point. So now we're back to a $500,000 cap. And generally, our grants are for 2 or 3 year cycles. So that $500,000 will be spread over that period of time. Just a snapshot of the last 3 years, we've received a huge influx of funding. We were able to do some really amazing work all across the state, from the Berkshires to the Cape, and in all different industries, a lot of which are represented on this call today. So in the last 3 years, we were able to award over $50 million. That's huge in funds through over unique grantee partners. Again, ranging through all different industries. Over 6,000 individuals have been placed. It's quite a large number of people through jobs all around the state. And then we have a pretty good job placement rate, about 89%. So really happy to share those stats, which we're anticipating to grow and continue into the future. Quick snapshot of what the demographics of our participants, WCTF funded participants, meet. And so this is 2023. About 3/4 of our participants are considered low income. Almost half of our participants are high school diploma or less. About 2/3 were born outside the United States. And about 3/4 are considered a racial or ethnic minority, which all these stats really fit into the mission of the organization and the grant. And I'm sure you share a lot of that as well. So we have 2 grants that we're announcing today. The RFP just came out about 2 weeks ago. And both of these, the next review date will be on May 10th, coming up in just over a month, actually exactly a month to this day, as I realize it, the next review period. And the next one after that will be a date in November, to be determined the exact dates. We have 2 grants that we're talking about today. One is the Donnelly Success Grant. That's the one that's existed since 2006. Where we're serving unemployed, underemployed, and incumbent workers. And the main outcomes of those grants are obtaining an industry recognized credential, a job placement and retention in that job for at least 30 days. If it is an incumbent worker program, is a wage gain and a promotion or a pathway to an advancement, part of that as well. The other one that's new for this round, which is really a rebranding of our scale grant, which some people in this room might have been recipients of as well, is called the WCTF Program Design Grants. And so essentially what that is that you might have this great idea, but we're looking for some money to start that up and start planning, and maybe hire a project manager and write a grant. That's going to be the program design grant. So we're looking at 3 or 6 month periods for those grants, up to $50,000. And the result of that should be applying for a Donnelly Success Grant within 6 months of completion of your program design cycle. And we will provide technical assistance throughout to help you with that next step. So if you have a great idea, but you're not quite ready for the big Donnelly Success Grant yet, the program design grant might be a great option for you. So just a little history about the funding and the different levels of funding. It's not a straight up same allocation every year. So as you can see, the bar in the bottom is 2006. Started off strong, and then throughout the years after that, there's been a modest allocation every year, modest and steady allocation. Then suddenly in the pandemic, 2021, 2022, we got an incredible increase of funds, both from the federal and state level. And so we were able to diversify, go into new industries we hadn't gone to before, and serve a lot more people. A lot of that has been awarded at this point. So we are going back to a more modest allocation going into 2025 and beyond. That could be increased in the future, but today that is where it stands. We'll still be able to fund a lot of great organizations, but to be totally transparent, it won't become completely competitive, but it will become a little bit more selective based upon that. So being transparent about that, about the funding availability. Industry representation by grantees. So these are current grantees. We have over 100 grantees all over the state. About 50% are within the healthcare world. And that's pretty much been the case since the inception of WCTF. There really isn't any other significant public funded healthcare grantee organizations. WCTF plays that role within the state. Followed by that, we have a lot of hospitality, life science, information technology grants, which we're happy to work with. And we're growing in the areas of transportation, construction, early childhood education. So we welcome applications in any one of those areas. New to this, or new again to this re-release of the RFP, is manufacturing is now going to be an eligible occupation in which you may submit a proposal for. Manufacturing was an option in the past for WCTF, but it went away for a couple of years. It's now back again. So we're happy to entertain applications in the manufacturing world as well. So who can we work with? Well, it really runs the gamut. We work with colleges across the state, public and private. We work with all the workforce development boards, all the career centers, many community-based organizations. Employers directly can be a lead grantee partner from any number of industries. And then, of course, nonprofits and for-profits. So it really does run the gamut. And if you have any questions about that, obviously, we can talk about that as well, if you do qualify. I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Tommy, please.
I think it's actually me.
Oh, Cynthia, excuse me.
Yeah, no problem. So then I'm going to look at a little bit more about like the details of this RFP and just what to anticipate. So as far as like who the grantee partners are serving or utilizing training programs for are going to be similar to past RFPs. So we're looking at, continuing to serve underemployed and unemployed individuals, still same definitions that we've utilized in the past. So underemployed is defined as those individuals earning less than 60% of the median household income that we utilize the same form that we'll show on the next slide. And then unemployed is defined as an individual who's not currently employed at the time of enrollment in the program. So we'll have 3 options on this RFP. So option A is this category. Option B is on our next slide. Great. Well, so here I'm going to look at first defining what underemployed looks like, or yep. Okay, sorry. And so this is a form that for those of you who have worked with or applied and served participants in the past, we've utilized this form every most recent RFP, looking at the USDA estimates that are updated annually. And so these are the most recent released numbers that we have, broken into the 16 regions of Massachusetts. And essentially, when anticipating who you're serving, like this is the guideline we set forth as far as like how to define the underemployed individuals in your direct metro or regional areas. And then looking at the program design for option B, this is the incumbent workers category, which means that participants must be employed in Massachusetts. So they don't necessarily need to be residents of Massachusetts, but just working at an employer within the state. And that it's also not intended to support high wage individuals, more those that are on a career trajectory toward a more sustainable wages or path to promotion. And so these proposals must include just some indication of what that advancement looks like. So what we are looking for is at least a 2-hour or more wage increase per hour. And then if that, for whatever reason, isn't attainable, looking at promotion or something that's consistent with equitable policies, HR policies within the organization. And then with this new RFP, we're offering an option C, which is really a hybrid of both underemployed and incumbent workers. So if you have industry that wants to serve both, we're able to accommodate, and then essentially just ensuring that if you are going to provide an option C as a potential program option, just making sure it's really clear the outcomes and who you're serving and how many of each you're serving, and then just trying to really differentiate, but making sure that we're able to clearly see how you're serving both populations. So then just highlighting what some of those key requirements of the Donnelly grants are, similar to past RFPs. We require at least 2 MOAs with employer partners. So the Workforce Competitiveness Trust Fund is meant to be a partnership-based grant. So you're welcome to have more than 2 employer partners that you submit MOAs for, but that's the minimum. We require 30% match. So that means that the grantee who's applying for funding needs to commit at least 30% of what the requested budget will be to the same, like match those funds. And then looking at the way in which we're like providing those outcomes to the participants served in training. So at least 75 placement in unsubsidized employment, and then also 75% of incumbent workers have those wage gains or promotions tied to their new employment, and always looking at that at a 30-day retention rate. And then I just wanted to note that while we don't require there to be a mass hire partner, we do strongly encourage and recommend that all of our grantee partners are connected in some way with mass hire. And, that can take lots of different forms, but, just wanted to highlight there that if you aren't already in talks with your local mass hire or workforce board regionally, then we definitely encourage you to do that. And just looking at sort of some of the key thematic elements of the application and what we want to see as far as different elements within this application. So like the job development piece really is going to be supported by the employers, and then the support on the job, right? And that's going to help us really see the employment retention that you'll be able to provide with participants when they're on program and after program. The recruitment and selection portion of the application is really where we're going to be able to see who you're targeting, and if it looks like, who we're targeting as far as who we want to serve with this RFP, and how your assessment and selection policy is going to get you to have a robust cohorts that are going to persist through program. And then engaging with community partnerships, we really want to look at and see like all of those connections that you've been able to make with your community and support that the program has and the project has, so that it's going to enable success of the project. So if there's roadblocks in one area, there's enough partnerships that exist with the project so that it'll still be successful. And then with the practical experience within that training piece, we really want to see some of those, like the work and career readiness, the technical skills, what is really going to be the hands-on training that participants will be able to successfully receive after completion of the program. And then looking at sort of overall what we'll look for characteristics of a strong application, you know, similar to like any of the grants that we've worked with in the past, I think it's really important to look at the RFP in detail, make sure that the proposal that you're submitting responds to what we're requesting in the RFP, and then making sure that really your grant initiatives and goals really align to what we're looking for. And that can be outlined in lots of different ways, as far as like showing your organizational structure and how it's going to be able to support all participants who you plan to serve. Also showing the strong partnerships and how everyone's involved in the project and ensuring the success of the project in the different ways in which they're involved. And then also ensuring that there's like a reasonable budget to support the project. So we really want to see projects that are strongly tied towards the majority of those funds being utilized for like participant success, participant like programs, the programmatic portion of the training versus like administrative support. So like really looking at how reasonable the budget is, as far as is it doing what it's meant to do to really maximize serving participants for the program. And then looking at the expertise or history of success is clearly demonstrated. That's something we'll definitely want to see, and how it's outlined. So if you're planning to apply for a pilot program, maybe there's other programs that are similar to this one, but anything that would really help us to understand how the project and how it's set up will be able to succeed in the environment that you're planning to recruit and then also place participants in. And then with that, like the clear implementation plan, right? So all of this is tied to really not just enrolling participants, but like lining it all the way through to persisting through completion of program to the employment retention piece, because that is like the end goal for the projects that we want to fund. And then, of course, looking back at those regional blueprints and really making sure that we're meeting the industry needs where they are. So really looking at how we're going to be able to serve both participants within the state of Massachusetts, but also meet the needs of what industry needs for their employment pipelines. And then when thinking through, this partnership model, which is what WCTF really is, and then looking at like who the lead applicant is, just to think through what that looks like as a lead applicant. So that the lead applicant is really the person or the entity that's having the contract with Commonwealth Corporation, the one who is managing those MOAs with the employer partners or any other MOAs related to training or working with Mass Hire or other partners with that are essential for delivery of program. Then also that lead applicant is communicating the timelines and coordinating with all of those other partners that are involved with the project. Then also submitting all necessary like policy related documentation to Commonwealth Corporation. So like recruitment and assessment policy, any other policy related information that we're requesting from you. That's really the role of the lead grantee. And then collecting and reporting on all participant data and submitting the invoices and reimbursement from Commonwealth Corporation. I'm going to pass it over to Tommy. Thanks.
Thanks, Cynthia. Great. So now I'll focus a little bit more on the budgetary aspects, now that Cynthia's kind of been able to talk more about the requirements and the programmatic aspects of an application. So as Adam mentioned prior, it's a $500,000 funding cap. That's a maximum contract award for a 2 to 3 year contract. So that $500,000 is spread over the entire contract duration. Another consideration that plays into account is the cost per participant. And so if you've been a previous WCTF applicant or awardee, you'll know historically, the cost per participant has usually been listed as around $10,000 per outcome, and we define cost per outcome as how much does it cost to employ a person at the end of the training. And so if you are a program that's applying to serve 100 people and you have a $500,000 contract, it wouldn't be, $5,000 per person. It would actually be the cost of $500,000 divided by, let's say, 75 people who get employed would be the actual cost per participant, which would be greater than $5,000. So there's been some leeway in what the cost per participant is. It's not necessarily explicitly listed in the RFP anymore as $10,000. However, the average is usually about 8 to 10 or 10 to 12 in some cases. So we, hope that applications that we receive can stay within that kind of that benchmark. But that said, if your program has a higher cost per person, perhaps the program is it's a more intensive training, or you're serving a target population that requires some additional support and resources to help them move through the program pathway into employment or advancement, then that's a consideration to take into account. And so as long as you can justify a higher cost per participant, cost per outcome, we welcome that still. And so please just, I'm not looking for $20,000 per outcome per se, but if it is, above the $10,000, $12,000 per person outcome, then just be prepared to provide some justification or respond to some follow-up questions from the team. The budget includes 3 main tabs in one Excel sheet. So it'll be the budget form, which is kind of a summary that outlines, the major budgetary categories of both your actual program budget and as well as the match budget. That's a summative page, and you don't really have to do too much with it. The main page is obviously your budget and what your program budget would be, and so you'll list line items that would correspond to the different expenses that would be part of your program. There's 5 major budget categories, which include internal staff and fringe. It includes other program costs like perhaps transportation, purchasing equipment or training materials. It includes support services, which might support with transportation for participants or work experience. It includes contracted services to any subcontractors that you will be working with, perhaps for training or something else, curriculum development, or other contractors might be helping out if it's a mass hire. And then your indirect costs, if you're listing those as well. And then you'd include your match budget, which again is that 30% requirement of your total contract. So if you had a $500,000 contract award, you'd be responsible to match $150,000 of that. And match can be cash, it can be in kind, it can be donation. If you're working with employer partners and you're convening them on some regular basis, perhaps you're figuring, okay, it costs $100 an hour of employer partners' time, and you figure, okay, we're going to have X number of meetings over the grant period. That could be a form of match, as well as perhaps other grants that you may be receiving, other funding sources that you may be receiving that aren't WCTF, could also be contributed as match. And it's a cost reimbursement model. So basically, you'll have expenses in a given month, and then you'll list those on a fiscal status report document, which Concord would provide to you, and then we would reimburse you for those costs as long as they're all allowable and part of your budget. So that's how kind of the budgetary structure tends to work. I talked a little about what are allowable costs. So program staff time. So program staff include folks that are working directly on the project. They're in charge of oversight and management. If you have folks that are indirectly related to the project, perhaps your fiscal staff or maybe other overhead folks, that might be included in the indirect cost rate as well. But anyone who's tied directly to the project, has a hand in the project that you would like to charge to the grant, you're also able to do that with match. Perhaps you don't want to charge them to the grant, but you will have folks that are working on the project, but you don't want to necessarily tie them to your grant budget. You can put them on the match budget, or split time as well. There's a couple different tactics you could pursue. Folks that aren't related to the project should not be included in the budget. So, if you're in a department of 5 and 3 of those people are working on the project and 2 aren't, you can't put all 5 on there. It should only be the people that are tied to the project. Cost for training and delivery could be tuition. It could be subcontracts with training providers. It could be purchasing training materials like books or uniforms or something along those lines. It could be cost for licenses for training platforms online, or getting a license and applying for those licensing exams if that's required to target occupation. All of that, those are all allowable costs, and you can include. Same thing with marketing and outreach. We want obviously you to have successful programs and be recruiting the right people and getting the word out enough so that you can meet your outcomes. So costs for marketing online or doing radio commercials or what have you, that kind of thing, having a presence to market and reach the right folks, all that's allowable as well. Support services, perhaps you're providing some help with transportation to help participants get to training or help them get to their job sites. Any other costs that are allowing participants to get some wraparound support to succeed, that can be included as a wraparound support service. Administrative costs or indirect costs, potentially fiscal staff who are working on the billing project, they can be included as well. So there's some, depending on what your project is, if you want to include some resources for research and evaluation, perhaps you have proof of concept and you really want to get some hard data to show the impact that your program is having. You would be able to use some of those grant dollars as well to do some research and evaluation work. And I think I touched a little bit already on the examination fees and licensing and those kinds of things might be tied to training and delivery. So this is a non-exhaustive list of buckets. All of these are detailed in a grantee guide that you would receive if you were awarded as well. So if you had questions on that, and of course you could put things into the budget or ask questions to this team to say, hey, we want to potentially include this expense. Is that allowable? Feel free to reach out and ask those kinds of questions too, either directly or through the Q&A. Now we talked a little bit about budget. Let's talk a little about outcomes and performance, as I kind of mentioned earlier on. WCTF has key benchmark requirements around completion and an employment outcome, whether that's a new job or advancement. And so if you enrolled 100 people in your training program, ComCore would expect that at least 85% of those 100 would complete the training successfully, and then 75 of those 100 would have some kind of employment outcome at the end of the training. So completion can include finishing the training and earning some kind of credential, be that an industry recognized credential if that's applicable, or perhaps a certificate of completion if there is no industry recognized credential for the training. And then we define employment as being retained in the target occupation for which you are training for at least 30 calendar days. So if someone started their job on April 1st, once they get to April 30th and they clock out for the day, that person is considered a successful employment outcome, whether that be that they hired into that job as a new job, or that they were promoted, or they received some kind of title change or a wage gain effective April 1st, that they were able to retain in that position with that level of advancement for 30 days. So what doesn't meet the threshold benchmark requirements are program performances that are below 85% completion and 75% employment retention. In some limited cases, if your target population is high need or historically may have a lower attrition rate than other target populations might, for a variety of different reasons, you can again try to justify that and give us some evidence on why a lower performance rate is acceptable for your program. However, kind of across the board, what we're all aiming for is that 85 to 75%. You're also welcome to propose higher rates and be overachieving and exceed that threshold. But again, ComCore recognizes that program attrition is a thing, and that not everybody who enrolls is likely to complete and get the job. So we bake into that attrition component to our benchmarks. But you are welcome to propose a higher rate if again your program has that historical performance, or if you have high confidence in your project, you're welcome to incorporate that if you wish. Communities of practice are another element of being a WCTF awardee, and this is a great opportunity to bring the whole portfolio together, and usually on a quarterly basis, and doing a couple different things. One is trying to cultivate relationships across the portfolio. Perhaps there are similar projects happening across the state that you're not aware of, and this is a great opportunity for you to be introduced to those projects and to those people and make connections and grow your network. And learn from one another. And that usually these are focused on some sort of best practice as applies to a particular topic of interest, such as best practices in providing wraparound support services for participants, or best practices around engaging employers. All these different things will be usually decided as part of the WCTF team, but we'll also usually survey the field to try to see, hey, what topics of interest seem to be interesting to you, and what are relevant topics to be discussing and exploring together. And as Adam mentioned, you kind of see it's largely healthcare, but there's a diversity of industries. And so you may be learning from programs that are maybe doing a totally different project, but might have similar employer engagement practices, and you can learn from them together, and everyone's kind of mutually benefiting. So those are kind of the goals of communities of practice. Again, we try to hold these quarterly. We've held one in January. We're holding another in May, and if you're awarded once your contract begins, you'd be welcome and invited to all those communities of practice. And we're trying to do a bit of a blend of virtual, synchronous, like these webinars like we're having today, and a little bit more interactive. But also now that we're trying to get a little bit more back into some in-person dynamics, creating opportunities to gather at a physical location and learning in a group. So we'll test the waters and see kind of which seems more appropriate and welcome by the community. But everyone will be welcome to these communities of practice upon award. Connecting with your market maker. Oh yeah, we're good. Thank you, Adam. There are 7 market makers listed here from each of the main 7 regions. You're welcome to connect with these market makers, and part of their mandates are to have a good sense of what's happening on the ground and connecting employers and partners to the right projects. Perhaps there's some projects under development or programs under development, and folks are thinking about applying for WCTF in the region. And if there's interest in getting a sense of, hey, does my program seem to be a good fit for maybe someone who's already started this process? I want to run a program and I want to know what kind of employers in my region might be interested in this program. Perhaps your market makers could be a good contact to get in touch with and ask them some questions about what they might know is happening around the region. So depending on where you may be situated across the state, these folks here are listed as the market makers. Our colleague Kristen Rain, who I don't believe is here today, but she is the director of each of these market makers and also oversees upskilling navigators who are based at the career centers across the state. And she could be someone to get in touch with. You can get on the bottom, there's a link, mass.gov/future skills is a good way you can also view this information here and connect with your region's market maker. So please feel free to do so. And if you have more questions about market makers, please feel free to email us as well. Now that we've talked about all these different things about how you should apply for WCTF and the things that you'd be required to do and whatnot, it's probably helpful to give a little overview of how to actually access the page. So everything is online on the ComCore website. So it's a little bit small, but you can kind of see the pictures on the bottom beneath the 3 ribbons. So first go to comcore.org. There'll be your landing page. On the top, you can kind of see next to the ComCore logo on the top left, there's like a white kind of stripe or ribbon. And in that ribbon is a link called Available Funding. And so that would be step 2. You would go click on Available Funding, and that would bring you to a funding page. And I think as of today, there's 4 or 5 available funding programs up on there, and 2 of those are the Donnelly Grant and the Program Design Grant. So you would just toggle down to whichever of those RFPs you'd be interested in accessing and pages you'd be interested in accessing, and click. And then on that page, you have the RFP. You have access to try to sign up for Q&A if you might have gone there already to register for the webinar. All the resources that you may need for the funding information should be on that page. So feel free to go there.